Gladiator 2 is directed by Ridley Scott and stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Denzel Washington, and among others. And this story is years after the events of the first film, where Paul Mescal's character is essentially getting, after an event happens to where he ends up fighting the Romans, that's led by Pedro Pascal. He ends up pretty much getting captured by the Romans in order to fight in a series of gladiator games, much like Russell Crowe in the first film. And along the way, it also gets into some complex stuff that's involved with Denzel Washington's character, where he's trying to work his way up to pretty much like overthrow the emperors that are running it, played by Joseph Quinn, and I forgot the other guy's name. And it gets into some kind of like other convoluted stuff that I don't really want to get into if I get into spoilers with. But it becomes a lot. It becomes more than just essentially rehashing stuff from the first film, as it kind of goes into its own plot. Now here's a little backstory. Now this movie was directed by Ridley Scott, who, what can I say? I've said numerous times that he's always been one of my favorite directors, and he's made so many great legendary films I've really enjoyed over the years. Especially with the original Alien, Blade Runner, even Gladiator being also one of my other favorites of all time. As the original film, to me, to this day, upon rewatch, it still holds up as not only very captivating, the way they were able to capture a lot of the action scenes, or the battle scenes in the Colosseum, but also just the way that it was able to give us that very grand scope of things that we would later, that paved the way for other film epics, like that brought back that epics type of style of filmmaking, like we would see with 300, Troy, and a lot of other films that tried to capture what Gladiator did. And Russell Crowe in that film also was not only one of my favorite, probably my favorite performance of his, but it's just that movie just all around is just so great upon rewatch, because it gets me to emotionally, and it does everything right with seeing what it was like basically in those Roman times. I know there's a lot of things that were in that film that I heard were not historically accurate, so to speak, and even with this one I heard the same thing. But even with that being said, as an entertaining film and as an overall emotional film as well and everything, the first film I still holds up as one of my all-time favorites. And so for over the years, I didn't really think they would ever make a sequel, because Gladiator always seemed to me like it was just a one-and-done type of movie that really didn't need a sequel. And for many years, they actually talked about trying to do sequels to it with a concept that apparently they wanted to resurrect. And this is a spoiler for those that haven't seen for those who haven't seen the first one. This is kind of a spoiler, 24-year-old movie and all. But essentially, they wanted to try to resurrect Russell Crowe's character from the first one, and he was going to do like this whole kind of time travel plot and all that. And I'm glad they didn't go with that idea, because I think that would have been really off and really out of place for a Gladiator film. And up until recently, it wasn't until the last couple of years that Ridley Scott decided to follow the events that took place from the first film by basically following the little boy that was from the first one all growing up, essentially. Now, going into this, I was actually really curious, but my expectations weren't like quite high. They were just kind of like in the middle, because seeing how Ridley Scott has still been trying to bring out these type of epic films that he's done with Napoleon, which I thought was could have been better. But The Last Duel I thought was really great too. So it's been hit and miss as far as his most recent films, but this one was still, to me, I was still keeping an open mind on. And after upon seeing it, I can say that this was actually pretty good. It's nowhere near as great as the first one, and it will never be the first one. But I still think, as a sequel in its own right, I still think it works in that regard. As far as being, as they quote in the first film and in this one, are you entertained? Well, yes, I was with this one, but it also gets into some stuff that I wish, could have been, that left some stuff to be desired. But to get my pros out of the way, I thought the cast in this were all fantastic. Paul Mescal, I'm not really too familiar with his work, but he definitely does have the physical prowess for playing this kind of character and stuff, and he is definitely decent as far as the overall character that he's playing and everything. It is a bummer they couldn't get the same kid from the first movie to come back, Spencer Tree Clark, to come back to play the role, but Paul still does a good job. It's just that he's just one of those kind of actors I think that, I'll probably have to see more of and other stuff to like really and everything, because he does a decent job with the overall, but I think he really hands it all more in the physical department. Because he definitely kind of lacks some charisma and everything compared to Russell Crowe from the first one, but he still holds his own, and he still was decent overall. The biggest standouts for me are definitely Denzel Washington in this. Like, I've always talked to endless times about how much I love Denzel Washington in a lot of his films, and the guy just really knows his way around trying to make this kind of character work, because he starts out as basically kind of a guy that wants to see Paul Mescal's character succeed in trying to do the games and stuff. but there's a lot more to him that I find myself very interested in where it was going, because not only was he very, very charismatic and just having a lot of fun playing the character, the way that he's able to manipulate people throughout the film, but there's something that happens later on that I thought, with this, the way his character grows and everything, that I found myself even more fascinated with how it plays out, because there are parts in the film where he pretty much he steals every scene from a lot of the other bigger actors throughout the film, and it's just so, because there's a lot of scenes in here where he's persuading a lot of people the way that he wants in order to get the power over Rome, and just there's so much great layers to his character that I couldn't get enough of them. The same thing goes for Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal I've really admired in a lot of his films that he's been doing, like with the Mandolin TV series, and he even worked with Denzel Washington and The Equalizer too. And here he plays the guy that Lucius is pretty much going after that's his main target that he's going after. But there's also something to his character that I found myself really interested with, how they were able to give him kind of a neutral side, so to speak, where he's essentially kind of questioning the stuff that's happening, but he's also it's like he's almost kind of playing like an anti-hero, so to speak. I'll leave it there, because there's some other stuff that we get into that he starts to understand about what's going on. And so he was great. And then Joseph Quinn I do enjoy, and I do like the other guy that plays the other Emperor in the film, and they definitely do seem like they're having a lot of fun playing these characters. But I did feel like he was very underused in this and not really given a whole lot of focus throughout the film. But when he is on screen, he is still good. It's just that he doesn't really have much of the same kind of prowess or that very intimidation type of feel like Joaquin Phoenix brought in the first film. And I think that was intentional, but I just felt like they could have really done more with his character to really showcase how intimidating he can be in that regard. Because these two emperors, they don't really seem like they're much of they seem like they make a lot of dumb decisions throughout, which I'll get into later. That's kind of my cons. And so it really leaves some stuff that I felt like could have really been explored more and really should showcase more of what these emperors can do. And so there's that. And then the other biggest standouts for me the most is definitely the battle scenes in this, because not only were they really on par with the first film, especially in the opening when we get to Pedro Pascal and his men having the sea battle that's breaching walls and everything, but the way that it was captured and everything, it reminded me of something out of Troy in a good way, where you're seeing all these catapults thrown at him and stuff, and you see a lot of brutality that I was really, it goes for it in a lot of ways that I was really shocked. I was like, damn. And then one of the other biggest things too is not only the Gladiator scenes are really great with how they're able to see the brutality of, limbs getting cut off and all kinds of stuff, but they're even able to mix sharks in this. And they literally have scenes where you have them doing these actual water battles that are in the Colosseum, which I actually heard that actually did happen, but they didn't have sharks involved. But they actually have sharks involved in this, and while some of the sharks can be a little CGI-ish at times, they still are pretty, creative with the way they're actually able to up the stakes a lot in this, because it showcases a lot of more about how these, the shit that Paul's character was going through is just, it's tough for him. And so that was great. And then the production design, especially the way they're capturing the ancient period of Rome, is great as well, much like the first one. And then the score is also very great and very epic, the way it plays out. And there's not really a whole lot of the score from the first one played that much. I mean, other than a couple, then when it gets to the end, it doesn't really play the theme song until near the end of the film. But when it is on screen, when you do hear it, it is still good to hear that familiar theme that we heard from the first film. And there's some other stuff that I really appreciate that they bring back certain characters on, like we bring back Connie Nielsen's character from the first. She was great as usual. And then you also bring back Derek Jacobi's character, who was in the first one. And there's more that, I'll get into my cons a little bit, there's more that they could have really explored, they could have done more with his character, but it's still great to see him. And so there's that. And then just the way that the movie also doesn't rehash the same stuff from the first film after a while was where it really got me. Because the first half of the film really does seem like it's more of, rinse and repeat of the stuff we saw from the first film, with, him going to the games and then also having to earn his freedom and everything. But then it actually takes a 180 turn that I found myself very engaged in where it was headed. And it actually gets into stuff that I didn't expect. And so when it goes that route, I was really glad of the change up for it, and it really got me. And so there's that. One of my biggest cons I will have to say is that this is going back to characterization. There's some characters they throw in here that leave a lot to be that are very underdeveloped and could have really, explored more with, especially with bringing back Derek Jacobi's character. You also have the emperors here that don't really seem like they have the intimidation compared to the first film. And then you also have some stuff that's not really, that's kind of glossed over or not really explored a whole lot with. Like, not going to go into spoilers, but when we get to the climax, it really feels like it's very rushed because it goes back really fast to where you're kind of seeing how it goes, where it's very predictable. And there is a cool fight scene that happens toward the end of it, but it goes by so fast that I was just like, okay, that's it. You know, it seems like they just ran out of time and they're just ready to end the movie. So that did kind of really hold the movie back on me a lot for in that regard. And then on top of that, there is some CGI, like I said earlier, the sharks and some other areas that do seem like they're not very rendered properly at points. But overall, though, I still found myself very entertained by this. It just shows that, you know, it's 24 years after the first film, and it probably wasn't a necessary sequel, but I'm still glad we got it because it is still entertaining, and it's everything that I really wanted to see, I at least expected out of a Gladiator film. And so with that, I'm going to give it a compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. So those of you who have also seen Gladiator 2 and also the first one, let me know in the comments of what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.